and welcome to this episode of Filmi Ladies. Happy New Year! We are starting this new year by talking about one of the most iconic actresses in Indian cinema. She is actually the most awarded actress of Hindi films, having won a whopping 5 Filmfare Awards. Funnily enough, her name Nutan actually means new. So perfect thing for our new year. Nutan, for those of you who don't know, and Beth and I were very excited to do this episode because it felt like neither of us were super familiar with her work. I think I'd seen maybe 1 or 2 movies of hers prior, so I was definitely very excited to find out what she was all about. For those of you who don't know, she is like Nargis, someone who comes from like a film family. So these are some of the most original Nepo kids, but we love them because they're talented and they work hard. Her dad, Kumar Sen Samarth, was a film producer and he made a lot of Marathi movies. Her mom, Shobhana Samarth, acted in many of those same Marathi movies. And Shobhana Samarth's mom, that's Nutan's maternal grandmother, had also acted in a movie as well. Nutan's younger sister, Tanuja, eventually followed her footsteps into the film industry. And Nutan's son, we all know as the Cad from Maine Pyar Kiya, Monish Bahl, of Ek Ladka Aur Ek Ladki Dost Nahi Ban Sakte fame. So Nutan, I decided to pick 2 movies of hers, one that most of the women in my family absolutely love and I'd never seen. It's called Saudagar. It's her first film that she did with Amitabh Bachchan. And the other film that I chose was one that I've heard very, very mixed things about. It really is so polarizing. You'll hear people talk this movie up like it's like the greatest thing ever. And then you'll hear people absolutely trash it. No prizes for guessing how I felt about it. But the movie I watched was Saraswatichandra. I believe Beth watched Tere Ghar Ke Samne, which I have not seen. So I'm gonna ask Beth now, what did you think of Tere Ghar Ke Samne and what did you think of Nutan in it?
Yeah, so going into this, I also know extremely little about her, other than that she is highly awarded for things I have not seen. And I that's one of the reasons I love doing this series with you, is that it is encouraging me to look at some things I hadn't. A couple of years ago, very good friend on Twitter, Sal and the Bad Pun, great username, had recommended a bunch of Nutan to me, and I still had not gotten around to a lot of it, but I believe this was one of them, so I'm excited to have seen it.
Oh.
I knew her as, great actress, but I hadn't really seen much of that. I was looking at what I have seen, and it's very few films, so it's kind of embarrassing, but here we are learning to get there. It's very nice.
Yes.
My movie is delightful. It is a Nav Ketan production. It is, Vijay Anand starring Dev Anand. Dev Anand is following this series around like gum stuck on a shoe.
Like a bad penny.
Yeah, not in a bad way, really, I would say, because we're watching fairly early things with him before he is super mannered in a way that annoys us. So here he is again. But this movie is delightful. And when I was tweeting about it, old friend Carla, who was the Filmy Geek blogger, if you remember her from back in the day, she said, I was so happy you watched this. I love this movie. And like, we haven't talked about Hindi films together in years because she's kind of doing some other things now. So this is a very cute film. It has wonderful footage, including a song shot at Qutub Minar in Delhi. So you get that nice kind of sightseeing vibe that then leads to this lovely scene of the parents eating ice cream sundaes outside. If you can wear leopard print and eat an ice cream sundae with the long spoon, you are living life correctly. So that is why this very fun lady is
She needs the crown.
Pretty much. This is, and Pitu and I both were thinking like, we actually could do this anytime we want. So we need to just do it more often. This movie is extremely charming. It's about 2 families whose fathers hate each other. I was never super clear on why, but it probably doesn't matter a whole lot. One of them outbids the other for a parcel of land in Delhi, and they're going to build a house, and the same architect is hired for both. The architect is Dev Anand, who is the son of one of the fathers. And then Nutan's parents are these people. And they fall in love without realizing who each other is. It's very cute. It goes about the way you would think it would. It has what I think could be considered a party song, referring to last week's episode. I don't know. I have a real soft spot, despite not having spent a lot of time there, for New Delhi and like fun social occasions in Delhi and being outside eating ice cream and on a terrace with a shawl on. Like that's all sounds so good to me. That I
Yeah.
think that carries this movie quite a ways for me. Not that it isn't also charming. The music is delightful. I thought Nutan was like a little sparkler of joy. Like, you know, you hold up the sparkler and
Yeah.
wave it around. Like she is that to me. You absolutely understand why Dev Anand falls in love with her instantly. She's a little bit feisty. She's sweet, but you know, sometimes people use sweet to mean like pleasant, but there's nothing else going on.
Like vapid.
Yeah, she's really, really charming. There's a few little ups and downs to their relationship, of course, including her, like when she finds out who he is, being like, oh, you know, it's so cute. You should definitely watch this movie. It is 100% adorable. I'm not sure how long I will remember it well because it didn't, like, I didn't feel there was a whole lot of substance there, but that is not a criticism, right? Like it is a delightful concoction of a film. I would also be happy to be told that these dialogues are actually a lot like more substantial than I was getting through subtitles. And there's actually a lot more going on here. Could well be, I don't know. Highly recommend. It was charming. This is not her first film by any means, but she's still quite young in it. And she's just, she's delightful. And when I was trying to think about what she offers that's different from the actresses we've talked about so far, she, based on my, again, limited experience, she does have a lightness to her that I am really enjoying. That said, I have not seen any of the long-suffering Bimal Roy films, so I know those are there. I know that's what tends to get awards. I started to try to watch Bandhani yesterday, but the subtitles weren't working, and I was like, you know what? This film deserves subtitles. I'm going to abandon that for another day. So I know there's more to her than that, but I was really struck by her sparkliness.
Nice. What was her chemistry like with Dev Anand? Because I believe they've done like 2 or 3 films together.
Super cute.
Okay.
Somehow, yeah, I can't quite articulate why, but I think they might be my favorite couple I've seen for him. I've seen more of his films than hers, which is why I phrase it that way. But I really found them delightful there because he also has a buoyancy about him. And I really thought they made a lot of sense together in terms of, for lack of another word, vibe, you know, they just kind of worked together, I would say. Have you seen any of their
see how
films?
they would be sort of like frothy almost.
Yeah. And that's one of those words that sometimes people use as a criticism, but I really don't mean it in a bad way at all. It is absolutely charming. It is an ice cream sundae of a movie. And who doesn't want that?
Sounds like a fun like rom-com to watch when you
Absolutely.
just want to like, you know, chill out and stuff. The 2 movies that I watched were not rom-coms, and they were not the kind of movies that you watch when you want to chill out or anything like that. And you certainly are not eating ice cream. There's one movie was very, very good, and it was Saudagar. And the other movie that made me want to pull my hair out and scream at people and made me very upset was Saraswatichandra. And you know what's so funny? I finished watching Saudagar, which was amazing, by the way, and I highly recommend it. Not only for Nutan's performance, but also because Amitabh Bachchan was amazing in it. I had just called my mom just like from like my weekly India call or whatever, and I'm chatting with her, and she was like, "What were you doing?" And I said, "I just watched the movie Saudagar," and she was like, "Which one?" Because there's 2, and I was like, "Not the Vivek Mishran one. I watched the one with Nutan and Amitabh." She didn't even let me finish my sentence. She was like, "I hate Amitabh in that movie. He's a horrible human being." I was like, "You are correct. He is absolutely a horrible human being. I mean, he's acted well, incredibly well, but the character is one of the nastiest men that you have seen on the screen. So good, like, but so horrible. So the movie was very interesting. I think you would really love this movie, Beth, and I think our viewers would love it, and they should see it as well. I saw it on Amazon Prime. It's a very unusual film, first of all. So it's based on a short story called Rus it's like a Bengali short story, and then they made that into this movie. It's very unique in that it's sort of like set in this like village somewhere in Bengal, and they're all like, you know, subsistence workers, sort of like daily laborers. So Amitabh Bachchan plays this guy Moti, whose profession I've never heard of and I've never seen on screen ever. He plays a date tree sapper. So that's a person who climbs up the date tree and puts the thing in it and a jug, and then the sap, he collects that. And then he takes that to Manjubi, played by Nutan, who is this older widow, and she converts that sap into jaggery. And then he sells
Mm.
jaggery cakes in the market. So they're basically business partners. Um, and I was like, oh, so that's how they make things like maple syrup. Even I had no idea.
Yeah.
But so it's very interesting to see him just like clamber up these trees and like tap this stuff. And, and he marries her. So this is what is so interesting. She plays like an older widow, and based on all the comments in the movie that the mean people in the village make, she is over the hill and old. And I was like, are you people blind? It's Nutan. Even in the most ordinary D-glam cotton saris with her hair in a bun, when she's squatting on the floor because she's sweeping the floor, she's making jaggery, she still looks like $1,000,000. Like, what are you people smoking? They're like, oh, she's so over the hill. How did you fall for her? And I'm like, have you looked at yourself in the mirror? What is wrong with you people? But anyway, so he basically tricks her because he just wants to cut out, paying her money to make the jaggery. So he basically tricks her because he actually wants to marry this young, foolish girl played by Padma Khanna, who did a really good job.
Oh.
So yeah, so he basically marries Nutan so he can take advantage of her, and then he intends to divorce her, which he does. He gives her talaq, and then he marries Padma Khanna. And then, of course, he is punished by the universe for his bad deeds, not in a filmy or melodramatic way, just in the sense that she stops making jaggery for him, and then his
Mm.
business suffers. And then at the end, he basically comes and asks her for her forgiveness. So it was a very satisfying movie to watch because she has a whole range of emotions she goes through. First of all, Amitabh plays this unabashedly bad human being. Like, he's just a shitty, shitty person. And she has such a good role because for once, you don't have a woman who has been wronged just forgiving someone. She
Yeah.
has a grudge against him. She, when he pronounces that he wants to like divorce her, whatever, she basically tells him to his face that he's a user of people and he's a terrible human being and he just takes advantage and he's selfish and blah blah blah, which he doesn't even deny any of those things. He's kind of like, yeah,
Mm.
kind of no. And the movie's name is Saudagar, which literally means a trader, someone who
Uh,
trades and does business, and that's exactly how he treats her. Um, and also, I like the fact that she, after she has been sort of betrayed by him, she doesn't just sit around and mope about it. She actually moves on in life. She continues working and, supporting herself, and then eventually she gets married to this other man, and then she sort of like moves on in life and things like that, but she has never forgotten how he behaved with her. And
oh.
towards the end also, she basically throws it back in his face like, oh, now you've come to apologize to me. So it's a very satisfying movie in the sense that it's very woman centric, it's a very feminist. You have a woman who does not make any apologies for who she is, and there's a quiet strength to her. Like, even though she's been wronged, she goes through all these emotions and all these feelings, but there's this strength in her that won't allow her to be, to collapse, even though she has no support system. And it's such a well directed and well written movie. There's one song especially that made me very angry for
Mm.
Nutan. um, it's the song Tera Mera Saath Rahe. So this movie, by the way, has great music. It's by Ravindra Jain, who used to give music for
Mm.
all of the Rajashri movies back in the day. And in Tera Mera Saath Rahe, she's basically singing. She's newlywed. She's just been married to Amitabh. It's her second attempt at sort of a happy married life.
Mhm.
And she's basically saying that, I hope you and I are together forever. Meanwhile, in that same song, at least watch the song on YouTube, if even if you don't watch the movie, he's cavorting with Padma Khanna the entire time. And she's just like domestic bliss. She's putting up, bed sheets to dry in the angan and all of those things, and he's just cavorting. So it's a really good movie. And I read this interesting bit of trivia about it. Apparently, this film was made when Amitabh was like a struggler. He was
I was
trying
gonna
to get a
say,
foothold.
yeah, the date
Yeah, he
indicates
was very
that. Yeah.
young in
Yeah.
this film. And apparently he approached Tarachand Barjatia, who's the producer of this film, because he wanted a role. And Tarachand Barjatia took one look at him. He was tall and skinny, and he said, "You're never going to be a hero, so you like, don't even try." And he was like,
Mm.
"Fine, whatever." And they were actually going to cast Sanjeev Kumar, in this role, which I think would have been terrible casting because Sanjeev Kumar is a lot of things, but he can't play someone who's that wicked. I just don't think he would have been able to pull it off. But they were apparently going to cast him. And then I read this interesting tidbit where it said that because of Slapgate, that did not go through. And then Tara Chand Barjatia had to hire Amitabh Bachchan for the movie. And I was like, what is Slapgate? So I had to do a whole lot of searching because, I'm a messy bitch and I love gossip.
Well, and Slapgate clearly refers to Shah Rukh Khan and
yes.
Shah Rukh Khan's husband, whose name I'm blanking on. Thank you. That is Slapgate as far as I knew. So
I was like, what is 1968 Slapgate or whatever era? I mean, this was made in the 60s. So I looked it up. Apparently, Sanjeev Kumar and Nutan had acted in some movie prior to Saudagar. I don't remember which one. And he had made some mischievous comments on set, and he had said something about how they should have an affair or something, and Nutan was very, very offended, and she slapped him, and she said, let's just finish shooting this movie, and then she never wanted to speak with him again. So she basically said to the Barjatis, yeah, I'm not going to act against Sanjeev Kumar. Thanks. So that's your random Bollywood gossip of the day.
I love vintage film gossip.
Right?
The most of all film gossip. I want the old stuff. I don't care about new stuff.
It's also like weird and petty, and these people could hold grudges until the end of time. It's crazy. And then they would be all like tight-lipped about it, and then eventually it would come out and they would be like, guys, we know what really happened. And then you read it and you're like, that's it, this person just made this one comment and that's it. That's ridiculous. But yeah, so that was Saudagar. She was great in it. Highly recommend. Very good movie. Watch it on Amazon Prime, and then send me messages and comments about how much you also hate Amitabh Bachchan's role in it. Very good movie.
I want to ask something about a thing that you said, which I think is incredibly important, especially for a podcast with the title that ours has. I love that you said this film is woman-centric. This film is feminist, because those two things are not the same.
Yes.
And I feel like people will say, oh, but the film is woman-centric, therefore it's feminist. Not at all. Those two things are not necessarily the same thing whatsoever. And I'm sure we can think of films that are focused more on women that are trash piles in terms of ideology. So
the other movie I saw isn't actually in that category.
Go for it.
It's horrible. First of all, it is horrible. Okay, so Saraswatichandra is I had so many feelings watching this movie, and none of them were good. I mean, I had maybe like one good feeling, but everything else, this movie is an avoid YAAR. Do not watch this movie unless you want to experience an evening of frustration like I did. So this movie is very strange and very polarizing. Apparently, it is based on a Gujarati novel, also called Saraswatichandra, and this is considered like the greatest novel in Gujarati literature, as per whatever research I did. The movie literally begins with a picture of the writer. His last name was Tripathi, and it's like a picture of his, and they're like, we're so indebted to him because we made his like magnum opus into this novel. And I was like, okay. And I watched this movie on YouTube because that's the only place I could find it. And all of the comments are basically split regionally. So any comment that upvotes the movie and says it's a good movie is basically a Gujarati person. And then anyone who hates it and says that it's absolute trash is basically non-Gujarati. So I was like, what the hell is this movie? It is so awful. So the movie is named for the male character whose name is Saraswatichandra. It's played, he's played by this actor called Manish, whom I have never heard of.
No, not at
I
all.
actually Googled, he looks a lot kind of like Joy Mukherjee. And he's actually not bad. He acted well, I thought. He had charisma. He's good looking. He has good chemistry with Nutan. But I was like, who is this person? So I Googled him, and he's done like 3 other movies, which I found very strange because this film, Saraswatichandra, was actually a big hit, and it did incredibly well. And I think it was also nominated for like a Filmfare or something. So it was actually a successful movie. So I'm surprised that this person just like vanished. So if anyone who's watching or listening to this podcast knows more about this Manish actor, please let us know because I'm very intrigued. So anyway, I knew this movie was going to be a trash fire because the credits begin with a song that talks about a little boy and we see this little boy who grows up to be Saraswatichandra. And the word that they keep using is the word tyag, which is the Hindi word for sacrifice.
Oh no.
Yeah. Sacrifice. Tyag is one of those words that anytime I hear it in a Hindi film dialogue or a Hindi lyric or a movie title, I know is going to be bad.
Can I interject just for a second? Because I want to know from listeners, please put into the comments any other words that when you hear it, the word, just a single word, you're like, avoid YAAR. Mine is it.
Oh, yes.
If you hear is it, I'm out, especially, unfortunately, if it is uttered by mutual favorite Shashi Kapoor.
Oh.
He has some stinkers of roles where, well, and he does them very well, but like he will play somebody who says, is it? For example, Shakespeare Walla, the Merchant Ivory film, I'm pretty sure he says, is it in there? And you're just like, oh no. I mean, thank you for showing me who you really are, fictional character. Right. But yeah, so tell us your avoid YAAR words in the comments.
Is definitely a very bad word, and it does also feature very many times in this movie. So we have tyag and we have izzat. This movie should have been called Tyag or Izzat because that's all it is about.
Please tell me there is a film called that and it's gonna have like the big yellow rocky looking font. Tyag or Izzat.
Yes, and like dripping blood and like a person in the corner with a machine gun. Wait, no, this is becoming like an action movie.
And you know who's in it? It's from the 90s and Dharmendra is in it.
Also, Mithun Chakravarti could have a role in it.
Yes, yes.
And you could have like a disco number to like make it a little bit happy. And then we go back to Tyagara. But so Saraswatichandra. So, okay, Saraswatichandra will be hated by anyone who hates Devdas because like Devdas, yes, like Devdas. So he's not an alcoholic in this movie, but like Devdas, you have this extremely idiotic main character who is very self-absorbed, who has very, very narcissistic tendencies, and who just makes decisions willy-nilly without thinking whatsoever, very impulsive, and just does whatever the hell they want, and don't think for 1 second about their impact on anyone close to them. So it's very Devdasi-ish in that sense. And all the women, and in this movie, primarily Nutan, have to basically cater to this idiotic person's whims and fancies. And in the process, they also become idiotic. So it's such a terrible movie. So Saraswatichandra, the actor Manish, is supposed to marry Kumud, played by Nutan. She looks gorgeous, by the way. The film is set in Gujarat, and she wears these beautiful lehenga cholis throughout the film. And she wears, because she's like a rich man's daughter, and she wears these Gujarati style saris and bandhani saris. She looks really, really gorgeous. And during their courtship, the songs are so beautiful. I mean, do not watch this movie because it's so bad, but definitely check out all the songs on YouTube. Okay. And we actually had, when I was growing up, my grandparents had an audio cassette of Saraswatichandra, and my grandpa did not know how to change the cassette. Like, you know, when the side A would be over and then you have to eject it, he didn't know how to do that. So he would always ask one of the grandchildren, he'd be like, can you change it? So I have listened to the Saraswati soundtrack throughout my childhood. And my grandma's favorite song, well, her favorite song was Ab Jaisa Koi Meri Zindagi Mein Aaye. But her second favorite song was actually Main To Bhool Chali Babul Ka Des, which is a Garba song in this movie. And I was trying to think, I feel like this might be the first time in Hindi cinema that we have seen a Garba song, which of course later became so popular and common, and then in the 80s, Dandiya songs, but it's beautifully picturized. It's very, very pretty. There's also this song, Chandan Sabadan, which is the courtship, and they have really good chemistry. And of course, she looks absolutely gorgeous. I took so many screenshots. But anyway, they can't get married because he's an idiot and he wants to sacrifice everything for some very strange reason that I was very confused about, like because his stepmom doesn't want him to get the money or something like that. I have no idea. So he storms out of the house one day, and then because now he's going to be a penniless pauper, and then there's like a montage of him walking in like torn clothes through these villages. And I was like, so you left your house like 2 days ago and already your clothes are torn? Like, what did you do? Did you like fight off a herd of jackals or something? It's so strange. And he writes to Nutan saying that because now I'm a poor because I have like, kicked the wealth of my family because of tyag and izzat and all these things. So I can't marry you because you deserve to marry a rich person, because logic. And
Reasons.
so she's very heartbroken about this, but then she's like, fine. And then she marries this rich person who, of course, is a complete caricature. He's played by Ramesh Dev, and he is someone who spends all his free time with call girls. And there's like a bunch of mujras. And I was like, okay. And she, meanwhile, has now become this very like ideal bahu. So her in-laws love her, her sister-in-law loves her, everyone loves her because she's so like ideal and perfect. And I was like, oh no, we're
Here it
now gonna
comes.
get a lot of spoon feeding about the ideal Indian woman. And sure enough, there's a song about the Bhartiya Nari. Bhartiya Nari is also one of those phrases that trigger me, because
Avoid
apparently,
YAAR.
yes, to be a good nari, and especially to be a good Bhartiya nari, you have to be very self-sacrificing. You have to be a martyr, and you absolutely have to be a doormat and just let people just take advantage of you all day long. That's what you're supposed to do. When Saraswatichandra discovers that Nutan has been married off to this horrendous person, he blames himself because, of course, everything is about this foolish narcissistic man. And there's a dialogue that made me cringe where he says, because of my mistake, this woman who was like a cow has now been tied to this butcher.
Wow.
I was like, where is that pack of jackals that I was sure was going to like tear you to pieces because you are an extremely annoying person? There's a lot of sad sitar music. There's a lot of sighing and bemoaning of one's fate. There is a lot of talk about kismat and karma and all of these things. And then eventually the movie also gets some sort of like weird, like spiritual aspect about how you're supposed to be like ideal and good. There's a lot of talk of virtue. And I was like, this movie is absolute trash. And then anyway, in the end, so, and then Nutan becomes a widow because, of course, she does. This movie is so ridiculous. So then she becomes a widow, and I'm not 100% sure why she becomes a widow, but she does. And her mother in law also dies. So now she has a father in law left and a little baby nephew. Okay. And so the
Okay.
question is, who is going to look after the father in law and the little baby nephew? Because,
Oh
father
gosh.
in laws are grown men and they cannot look after themselves.
Who could
Beth.
possibly do it? Who
No.
could it be?
It's not going to be Saraswatichandra, y'all. I give you a hint. It's
Uh,
not going to be the foolish narcissistic man. It's going to be Nutan. So in the end, I had such hopes. I was like, okay, this movie is a trash fire, but perhaps it can be saved. Because in the end, by happenstance, Saraswatichandra and Kumud bump into each other in this ashram that they have both taken solace in, because the world is so terrible. So they're in this ashram and they've met each other. And then Saraswatichandra makes this impassioned speech, which I appreciated, where he basically says, I've been a cad and I've been terrible, which I was like, you are correct. And then he was like, I made a mistake. I'm like, you are very correct. And then he says, I want to make amends. And I think you and I were meant to be together and we love each other and let us marry. And I was like, finally, you foolish man, you have made a good decision in your life. And then, of course, Nutan lets me down. And then Nutan says, because she's a widow, she can't marry him. And also, who will look after her father-in-law and the little baby nephew, Beth? Come on, think of them. So she says, no. Then her whole family, her parents and her sister encourage her to get married to Saraswatichandra because they're like, it's fine. Just marry him. You will be, I know. So I was like, okay, great, good. Okay, someone is knocking sense into her, right? Her own parents are saying, marry him. This is the only thing that will make you happy. And she's like, nope. And then her father-in-law says, do not sacrifice your happiness on account of me. I'm an old man. How many years do I have left? And I will always care for you as the most amazing daughter-in-law I could have gotten. Go seek happiness. It will be fine. And as far as the baby nephew, whatever is concerned, he'll be okay too. We will take care of each other. I was like, yes, wonderful, great. And then Nutan is like, nope, don't wanna. And I was like, what the heck is wrong with you, woman? So at first, so I spent 90% of this movie hating Saraswatichandra and just wanting a pack of jackals to attack him because he was so fucking stupid. And then at the end, the 5% that was left, I hated Nutan's character for being so idiotic and regressive. Everybody is telling her to get married to Saraswatichandra, and she says no. And then the movie ends with this idiotic song, which is a continuation of the song that the movie began with, where again we hear the words tyag and izzat, and there are these 3 or 4 lines in it about how women are the ones that have to show the world an ideal of how a woman should be, and also specifically Indian women,
Sure.
Bharatiya Nari. So I was like, I did not ask for this burden. The only thing I am willing to be a role model for is ice cream eating in leopard coats like that woman behind you, who I think is a wonderful role model. I do not want to be some idiotic self-sacrificing. It is such a stupid movie. And for a movie in 1968, to have the character say, I'm a widow and I am going to be faithful to the memory of my husband, of my dead husband, who, by the way, we know used to cavort with prostitutes all day long. And I'm going to sacrifice my happiness. I'm like, it's 1968. What is wrong with you people? And so then I read the YouTube comments. And then, like I said, there was this split. If you were Gujarati, you loved the movie. And if you weren't Gujarati, you said it was crap. And there was this one man that I thought was so brilliant. He wrote, "What is this movie I watched? It is sentimental stupidity." And I want to invite him to be a guest because I love that he called it sentimental stupidity, which is my new favorite hashtag.
What is there an earlier version of this as a film? Like, is this the first adaptation of this novel?
I feel like it's the first adaptation of this novel, but I did read somewhere that it's also a play that has been shown in Gujarat. And Sanjay Leela Bhansali apparently very recently made this into a TV series, which is also called Saraswatichandra, and apparently it's very popular and people watch it on YouTube. And he changed the ending, so at the end, Saraswatichandra and Kumud do get married and everything. And I think it's set in modern times. And apparently that TV series is popular. I don't know.
That sounds
But
terrible also, but okay.
also Bhansali, so you
right.
know.
I mean, I was just like, oh no.
I know. There's a lot of avoid yars with this movie.
Oh boy.
But I never want to hear the phrase Bharatiya Nari again, along with Tyag and Izzat. So yes, it was a torture.
This is making me think how interesting it would be to do a big round robin conversation on adaptations of each major region or state or major language's most beloved novel, right? So we've got 8,000 Devdases to choose from, as discussed. We could do this. We could do, I don't know what the most beloved Hindi novel of all time is.
I have no idea.
Obviously Ponniyin Selvan is in there.
Would be for Tamil Nadu, I would assume.
That would be a really interesting set of things to compare. But anyway.
So is Devdas the most beloved novel in Bengal? I mean, I imagine it would be, because
I don't know enough. I don't know enough to say. I mean, I suspect if you put all the Bumkeshes together, they would outweigh, right? But in terms of a single work, and I guess it's a novella more than a novel. I have not read it. I will not read it. No, thank you. But yeah, well, yeah. So it'd be interesting to.
I actually read that in Gujarat, this novel, Saraswatichandra, like excerpts of it are part of the syllabus. I was like, why? It's horrendous. It's like, what? Like, I'm not a book banner. I think banning books is ridiculous, but like, this is not, you should not have young children be anywhere near this novel, because this novel is bullshit. And it is the most anti-feminist thing. So I had a very interesting week leading up to this recording, because I watched Saudagar, which was so wonderful and very satisfying and clearly very feminist and also women-centric. And then I watched Saraswatichandra, which was extremely frustrating and illustrates the point that you made, where you said women-centric and feminist are two different things. Because even though this book/movie, whatever, is called Saraswatichandra, which is the name of the man, the film really pretty much revolves around Nutan's character. She has the biggest role, and she's the one who makes the decision in the end to sacrifice herself for God knows what ideals.
Mm.
And she's the one who's hailed as this like amazing virtuous person. There's references, because they're in an ashram, there's references to how like the goddess has inspired her, and I was like, this is such a crock of bullshit. It's like you've taken everything terrible and mixed it up. And it's actually a pity that this movie has Nutan in it, because I mean, by all accounts, the women of the Samarth family, Shobhana Samarth, Nutan, Tanuja, Kajol, they're all very strongly feminist women. And I did read that one of the reasons that Nutan has such an amazing cinematic body of work is because she specifically only took parts where she had an author back role and where she had like a point of view. She never wanted to be like, just like eye candy. And if her role was not the most important, she at least wanted it to be on par with the actor, which makes sense when you see her movies like Sujata, Bandini. I mean, the actor in a way doesn't even matter in those films. I mean, I've seen Sujata and it's an out and out Nutan film. Like you could replace Sunil Dutt with anyone else and it would be fine. It wouldn't matter. So I'm very shocked that she would agree to do a movie like this. And I'm a little bit disappointed. I'm like, really? With your legacy of work, you did this movie? It's awful, very disappointing, and a very, very big avoid, YAAR. Having said that, she herself is good. She's very like noble and self-sacrificing and all these things. She looks very, very beautiful. She is very believable when she is giving these extremely terrible monologues about Tyag and Izzat, which is kind of a shame because I almost would have preferred those dialogues to be mouthed by someone who was a terrible actress, because then I could be like, do you listen to yourself? Can you listen to how stupid you
lessens
sound?
when good performers do it, it increases their impact, unfortunately.
Exactly. So I was just like, no. But people should watch the songs on YouTube or whatever. They're really, really pretty and very beautifully shot. The cinematography of this movie is actually really nice, like the way they've shot the light and shadows and all of those things. And the actor is pretty decent as well, although I don't know where he disappeared to. Yes. I'm still not recovered.
It can really take a lot out of a person to watch movies like this.
Yes. And I finally understand why this movie is so like polarizing, because for some reason in my family, the people have watched these Nutan films, because like I said, my mom had an immediate reaction when I mentioned Saudagar, where she was like, I hate Amitabh Bachchan in that movie. This is horrible, which he is. And Saraswatichandra, I remember at home, people would always like roll their eyes at that film. But I never watched it. And so I had no idea why, but they were always just kind of like, that film. And now I know why.
I have a friend who was trying to, in the goal of self-education, watch all the Filmfare Best Film Award winners starting at the beginning and going forward. And
that's a great challenge.
And she, like me, was coming to Indian cinema as a adult who grew up in a different culture. And she got to some of the Bimal Roys, and like that was it. She had to stop. And this morning I was chatting with her and I was like, so I was going to try to watch Bandini, but like it didn't happen. She was like, it's fine. You don't need to watch it.
But I've read about Bandini and it sounds really cool. I mean, she plays a convict, and apparently the reason she poisons or murders her lover's wife is because she's jealous. And I like movies where a woman is actually portrayed as, a living being with feelings and thoughts and emotions, because who knew that's how we are. And so she apparently undergoes all these emotions where she has remorse for what she's done, but also there's a reason she did it. And it sounds interesting, like a very gray character. So it is on my list of movies I want to watch. It's just I really wanted to understand why my family, every time the word Saraswatichandra is mentioned, why there is so much eye rolling and sighing. So I just wanted to I wanted to be able to participate.
Fair enough.
So yeah. My mom also made an interesting comment that gave me pause, because I told her about how we were going to record an episode on Nutan, and she was like, oh yeah, Nutan was really lovely, and I was like, What's the but? My mom said, but she always did these like very sad movies. And I was like, true, she did a lot of these like social dramas or whatever, like really weighty, sort of meaty films. But I was like, would you or your generation categorize her as unremittingly weepy as Meena Kumari was? Because I think of Meena Kumari as Moaning Myrtle. You know, she's the
Yeah.
same as Moaning Myrtle in Harry Potter. And my mom was like, no, at least with Nutan, it's like, yeah, okay, there's these very like heavy movies, and most of them are tragedies, and but at least there's a reason for it. Like there's a reason why sad things are happening. Whereas with Meena Kumari, it just feels like you're just going to cry from beginning to end for no reason. And I was like, yeah, that kind of makes sense. That's kind of the sense I have of them too. But I do wonder why she didn't do more comedies, because it seems like she has a good comic timing based on the film you saw.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I thought so. I would have to think hard about whether she had as much of the comic dialogue as Devanand did. That didn't really, it didn't strike me one way or the other while watching. But she's, even if she's not the one speaking, her, reactions and all are still contributing to the lightness and the comedy and everything. So
Interesting. I also found something very funny when I was like Googling her, because, like I said, I really don't know a ton about her and never really had very strong opinions about her, unlike say Nargis or whoever, Wahida, whom I love. And I read that throughout her childhood and her adolescence, she was considered an ugly duckling. And I was just like, what? On what planet is this woman an ugly duckling?
yeah, that is ridiculous.
That's completely crazy. It was like, what are you talking about? And apparently, and that's also kind of like underscored in that movie Saudagar, where they're like, oh, she's over the hill. She
Oh,
must
right.
have done some black magic to get Moti. And I'm like, she looks more gorgeous in that plaid cotton sari than the rest of y'all wenches do. So I found that very strange. It was like, did they have like completely different beauty standards back in the day? And that really famous film photographer Gautam Rajadhyaksh, he of the soft focus and the Vaseline lenses, he actually, when he came out with this coffee table book called Chehre, or Faces, he said that Nutan, according to him, was the most perfect face he's ever photographed, because she was perfect from every angle. It
Huh.
didn't matter how you shot her, she always looked gorgeous. And I was like, yeah, well, that makes sense. So what is this ugly duckling stuff that they're going on about? So that was very strange to me. But yeah, so based on your watching her one film and me watching these two films, and what we've heard about Bandini and Sujata and all of that, all of the Bimal Roy stuff, what do you think about Nutan? Do you feel like you got a better idea of who she was as an actress?
I do. I feel like this was different than certainly what I associate her with, but I
Oh,
clearly have a ton to learn. So or the one I watched is different, because I wouldn't have said I associate her with weepy, but I did associate her more with like drama, you know.
yeah.
Um, so I will be excited to watch more of hers. And like I said, I had a good friend who recommended me things quite thoughtfully that I need to follow up on, and I would like to do that. So this is pretty good inspiration for that. Every time I watch, because I'm so interested in history, every time I watch one of these films, even if it is a fairly light and fluffy concoction or something, I still just feel like I learn so much, even if just things like, what are social norms they're talking about, what are mom fashions like in the day, all that kind of thing is really so interesting and just enriches everything. So I can't wait to see more of her, but of her specifically as well, right? Like she's clearly really wonderful, and I have a lot to learn. And also the people probably know I'm interested in these kind of family trees and what
Oh,
those,
yeah.
what the family connections mean and don't mean and all that kind of stuff. So she's a pretty wonderful example of a group of people where some talent seems to be flowing through and being nurtured, and the opportunity and the nurturing and all are flowing along very effectively. I also feel like it is fascinating that she and Tanuja are sisters, because they seem very different to me. I've seen more of Tanuja's films, but I've also seen more of them in Bengali, where I do prefer her there to Hindi, but I do really, I like her fine in Hindi as well, but they seem quite different to me. So that's interesting, I think.
Actually, read something interesting once about Tanuja. I read that so Tanuja has the two daughters, right? Kajol and Tanisha Mukherjee. And apparently, uh, I mean, this is just some gossip that I read that Tanuja is apparently very, very close to Tanisha Mukherjee, and they have a far stronger mother-daughter bond than Tanuja and Kajol do. And apparently, the reason for that was because of the two sisters. Nutan was always hailed as a great actress, and she was the most highly awarded. And
Oh,
Tanuja has never, I mean, even if someone is a fan of Tanuja, she has never been considered like a great actor. And quite a few of her films were where she was just sort of like being pretty and cute and sort of eye candy-ish. So apparently, the fact that their mother Shobna Samarth was considered such a great actor in Marathi
mhm.
cinema, and then Nutan was considered a great actor, she felt very sidelined. And so the fact that Kajol became super famous and known for her acting and very successful, and Tanisha Mukherjee failed, which, I mean, if you're going to do movies like Neil and Nikki, it's not a very good career move, just saying. Um, Apparently,
I,
that's one of the reasons why she's much closer to Tanisha, because it's sort of that same like
yeah,
sister
I can see that.
dynamic.
Just speaking of Neil and Nikki, I had not realized that the director of Kala wrote the
Oh,
lyrics for the title song of Neil and Nikki.
oh, Anvita Dutt, really?
Yes,
Okay.
yes.
What are the lyrics like? I've never seen this movie, by the way, because I value my sanity.
I can only tell you sort of briefly because I've blocked them out, but it's one of those ones that has English in it that just sounds
Yeah, yeah.
super silly. So it's I'm Neil, I'm the man, rock star, superstar, or whatever. Nikki Bakshi, sweet and sexy, full on rockin', hot and happening, or something like that. And you're just like, oh, the mid 2000s were a very bleak time, a very bleak time.
I remember being scandalized, and I am not a prude by any stretch of the imagination, but I remember being scandalized by just the costuming of Neil and Nikki. What in heaven's name did they put Tanisha in? It was these
Yeah.
weird, like macrame and crochet, like bikini tops and like weird skirts. And I was just like, what is going on? And in my brain, for some reason, I always confuse Neil and Nikki with Pyar Impossible, because they
Oh,
both have
sure.
Vijay Chopra in a similar role. And then it's just like, yeah, very bleak time, as you said.
I mean, I'm
But
not out here clamoring for another opportunity for Tanisha, really, but like I did, poor
yeah.
woman, you know.
But it's interesting the point that you made about history and how you learn about social mores and things like that, just even from the frothiest of films. And I'm kind of in the same boat where I am Indian, but I didn't grow up in India. And I
Right.
would only go to India for like 2 weeks every year. And it was just like a whirlwind holiday of meeting relatives and then going back home. So for me, also to some extent, it feels a little bit like being a cultural anthropologist,
Yeah,
because to me
totally.
also there's so many references I don't understand, because I didn't do my schooling in India, and I don't think of
Right.
India as home. It never has been. It's
Yeah.
my parents' homeland, not mine. And so there's always that weird thing. But one thing I was thinking of was, I think Saraswatichandra came out in 1968. And this morning I was sending you and Amrita these videos from Waqt. I was sending you the swimsuit scene from Waqt, where Sadhna
Mhm.
is changing in the changing room, and then Sunil Dutt is like, coochie cooing with her, whatever. And then she's in a swimsuit and she's diving into the Sun and Sand Hotel pool. And Waqt came out in 68 as well.
65 is earlier.
65. But that's what I mean. It's so confusing to me, because now,
Yeah.
to be fair, Saraswatichandra, even though the movie came out in the 60s, it's set in like it's a
Right.
period film. So it's not actually set in the 60s. But still, to me, it's like you have this movie 1968 saying absolute and utter bullshit, and it's so infuriating. And then you have a movie like Waqt. And I'm not saying that, you know, an indication of modernity is women wearing swimsuits and like all of that. I'm not claiming that at all. But also an indication, but it just kind of like boggles the brain sometimes when you look at the timelines of certain films, and then you're like, wait, they came out in the same year and this is like the same universe they inhabit? How? You know?
So the speaking on something we touched on briefly in our party song episode, the one of the songs I mentioned, Choti Si Malakat, that's a Hindi remake of a Bengali film that's 15 years before it. And it's about child marriage. which is a doozy of a topic. And the Bengali film is much more progressive than the Hindi film, even though it's significantly earlier. And you're just like, how does this happen? But, both of them star Uttam Kumar. So he's clearly, I believe he's even a producer on the later one. And so like, why is he wanting to do this story again in a worse way?
Right.
Ah!
It's very strange, but then it also makes me wonder about things like, to what extent are we as viewers being fair or unfair? When, you know how I said that I was disappointed with Nutan because I was like, you're famous for being a feminist, you're famous for doing these extremely feminist movies with very feminist points of view, and then you go and do this dreck like Saraswatichandra that makes me angry, and it's like, how could you do that? Where sometimes as viewers we sort of like take it personally, and there's that whole like art versus artist thing that we find ourselves falling on either side of. So that's interesting too. Like, I don't know to what extent we are being unfair when we do that, but it is what it is.
I mean, we cannot not bring our contemporary selves to it. She could not bring her contemporary self to it. And for something like a film, I think, well, even if you are the star, you only control this tiny little sliver of the whole thing. And even you might know what was filmed, but you don't know how it's going to be edited and all that kind of thing, right? So like, it must be very, very complicated to choose a role if you are trying to very much care about that kind of thing, especially if you are not also the producer, right, or tight with the producer, right? So I'm sure that must be very hard. I also give a lot of performers a hard time about what they choose because, yes, but we all joke about like, oh, this film was chosen because someone had a mortgage payment due,
right?
But like, what is everyone's got to work, right? Like most of us don't have inherited wealth. We do actually have to earn a living. So it is very complicated. And I think the best answer most of the time is just to try to allow yourself to feel it's complicated, because it is.
Yeah.
Because, like I work in museums. Am I proud of the imperialist, colonialist baggage that museums have? I am not, but I can at least try to do something about it now from within my
right.
Right. So it's complicated for everybody once you start to think about it. And I'm just really glad that people are thinking and talking about it. I think it's really important.
Like, at least have the conversation.
Yeah. Even if it's just a conversation with yourself, like what am I judging this person for? What are the values I'm bringing and why? And I also think it's absolutely fine to judge past things by now standards, because if we didn't, nothing would ever change.
Yeah.
So I forget what.
And to be fair, we do give credit when we see like older films where we're like, well, this is pretty awesome. So why not also give brickbats at the same time? If something is trash, it's trash, y'all. I suspect that a lot of the comments that are favorable towards Saraswatichandra, like just go and look at some of the comments on the YouTube link for that movie. A lot of it just comes across as regionalism. It's just like, I'm Gujarati and I'm going to say this movie is great because it's Gujarati. No, it's okay to call it trash, unless you truly don't think it's trash, which is ridiculous.
That's really interesting though. Like, and again, since we have at some level, a translation, right, is happening here.
Yeah.
And not just a language translation, but a cultural translation and a medium translation and all that kind of thing. So that is, I do think, again, as an outsider, the learning some about regional differences, for lack of another word at the moment, that is super fascinating, and how some things don't, a thing that I might like, certain things I expected from watching hundreds of Hindi films. When I started watching Bengali films, I'm like, oh, this is actually quite different. And people were like, well, of course it's different. It's a different region. I'm like, no, I see what you're saying. I just had been conditioned and hadn't thought about it. I hadn't thought about it. It was my own fault for not having thought about it. And I think I just think that's fascinating.
Yeah, I mean, it's not a monolith. It's just, and even certain directors, sometimes they'll make a movie where you're like, this is awesome. And then you're like, well, what happened to you? I mean, Mahesh Bhatt is such a prime example of that. You see some of his older films that you're like, well, this is pretty cool. And then you see some of the things he made later and you're like, what happened to you? Did you go crazy? Yes. At least there's some people like the ones who are like completely modern and completely new, and they can't hide behind things like, oh, it was the era, and then we can just like wholeheartedly hate them. Like I was looking at the list of movies that are going to come out in 2023,
Ah,
and I think one of the films that is coming out that I will not be watching in the theater or on streaming or in any way, shape, or form is Animal, because it is made by Sandeep Wanga Reddy, one and only person who made Arjun Reddy and Kabir Singh. No thanks. Don't
oh no,
want.
thank you. Avoid YAAR.
Oh, it's an avoid YAAR. I don't even know what the movie's about.
Doesn't matter.
Doesn't matter.
Speaking of 2023 films, have you watched the song from Pathan yet?
It is terrible. It is absolutely terrible. Okay, I'm calling
And
it.
I should say,
It's
as we
gonna be a
film
bad
this,
movie.
it is December 13th. So this is fresh news as we're filming this. So we know it's ancient by the time you're watching, but sorry, go ahead.
No, I think that movie is going to be bad. I hate to say it as a Shah Rukh Khan fan, and I probably will watch the movie again because I'm a Shah Rukh Khan fan, but it has a void year all over it. It does not look promising at all. And I think as a Shah Rukh Khan fan, I'm just going to place my bet on Dunki. I don't know how to pronounce that movie.
I don't either.
Dunki. It's by Rajkumar Hirani. So even when he makes movies that frustrate me like Sanju, they're still decent. So I have hopes from Dunki or Dunky or whatever it is. But Pathan, no, that song is horrible. What is that song?
I was not into it either. And this is the first place I'm saying. So, again, sorry, I keep referencing the same person. My friend Melanie on Twitter said, I love when a new trailer or song drops because half my timeline is in Rapture and the other half is saying WTF is all this.
Yeah.
And so sometimes she retweets that when something drops. And so she put that up again. She also said, I don't know what people are, she said something like, I don't know, people prancing around in swimsuits is a time-honored Hindi film tradition. And she had a clip from Rangila.
Right.
I was like, yeah, so it did not do anything for me. He looks weird. I don't know what the smoothing, de-aging, whatever's going on. I don't know. I wish he was dancing more in that particular song. So hopefully there's some more later. It just
But
didn't
not the steps
feel.
that Deepika was doing, because those steps
No.
were ridiculous. It was like a Jane Fonda workout.
It did not feel. I was trying to think, like, could I swap in anyone else into these roles? Yeah, I felt like I could have swapped in anyone for those things. I didn't find it special. And I guess I wanted more. And I quite like Deepika too. So it's not just a Shah Rukh issue, but I was pretty underwhelmed. The trailer of the film as a whole, I'm sure I will watch it. I'm sure I will enjoy being in the cinema to see him on the big screen again.
Yeah.
It is very much not for me other than that. But I know that.
Yeah.
And if I like it more than that, I'll be pleasantly surprised. That's great. But I have very low expectations of it for myself.
Yeah. It's very like Michael Bay / Rohit Shetty-ish. I do not watch films by either of those people. So there you go. Did you see the Circus trailer? I'm not even going to watch the movie because Ranveer Singh, I don't care. It's terrible.
Yeah, that also looks very much not for me, in a different way.
Also, I feel like Mera Naam Joker has like traumatized an entire generation of people. Like, I don't want to watch anything circus related from Hindi cinema because Mera Naam Joker was such a slog fest. So I don't want anything circus related.
That movie is a real slog fest. And I actually was on a podcast about that a couple of years ago. I was asked to watch that and one other film, and I did. And I will link that in the show notes. Bollywood is, oh my God, I apologize to Matt and Aaron for blanking on the name of their podcast. I'm so sorry. My brain, it's after work for me and I'm just dead. I will link it in the show notes if you want to hear me talk about Mera Naam Joker, but I mean, honestly, don't, because Mera Naam Joker.
It's awful.
It's unnecessary.
I know someone, though, whose favorite movie of all time is Mera Naam Joker.
What?
Yeah, it's my husband's uncle, one of his uncles. It's his favorite movie of all time, like favorite. Huh. Yeah, it made me look at him in a whole new light. I was like, Here you are. I thought you were a perfectly normal uncle type of a person, and now I find out your favorite movie of all time is Mera Naam Joker. What does this say about you?
People are confused by when I name my favorite films. So I get
Which
it.
is your number one favorite movie? I don't even know. Like number one, you have to pick
number one
It
favorite
can't be-
ever. Oh,
Yeah.
well, okay. So that you may not have seen this film since the 70s are not your era, but probably Parvarish from the 70s. It's a Manmohan Desai film. It came out basically the
Is
same
it
time
the
as
one
Amar.
with Jitendra?
No,
Oh,
it's Vinod Khanna and
oh, that's
Amitabh.
Parichai that I was thinking of. Okay,
Yeah.
no, I have not seen Parvarish.
It is, if people are not sure if they've seen it, it's the one with the submarine, and that's going to mean something to some people.
I've definitely not seen it.
I probably would say, I mean, most days you ask me, I'd say that's my favorite, but
Oh.
you know, so I would definitely, if I ever meet your husband's uncle, I would love to hear about this, because it is always possible someone has seen something in a film that I have missed. You know, again, teach me. I would love to learn. If you are willing to share with me, I'm very willing to listen. I suspect I will not agree with you, and that's okay.
Yeah. And also, to be clear, I'm not just dissing him, because like my favorite film of all time is Kabhi Khushi Kabhi Gum. So I'm not claiming to be some extremely like cerebral, very intelligent film critic, film historian type of person. Okay, my favorite film is Kabhi Khushi Kabhi Gum. So I'm in no position to go around dissing people. It's just, I just want to know what your brand of madness is, because I'm clearly insane. And you're insane too. And it's interesting when you see someone that you think is perfectly normal, and then they say something like their favorite movie is Nayanam Chopra, and you're just like, huh, learn something new about you. Like that sentence will tell you so much more about that person than anything else could.
Yeah,
right?
Where you went to school, what you studied, what you do, where you travel, like none of that has anything on what's your favorite movie.
Yeah, like that just tells you everything you need to know in a weird kind of way. But yeah, okay. So I think we've concluded our Nutan episode. So thank you guys for watching along with us. We wish you a very, very happy 2023. Hopefully this will be a good year for all of us. Please like, share, and subscribe, and write your comments. Tell us what you thought of this episode. Tell us what you thought of Nutan. And if you know more about Nutan's movies than clearly Beth and I do, then we would love to learn from you. And if there's films of hers that you think we should give a shot, then let us know as well. And at some point, I think we'll try to catch up on them, because we are woefully under-equipped with Nutan knowledge. So thank you for watching.